Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the MXGP podcast show. We are still in the wake of Anaheim 1 and we'll have a little bit of that at the end of this podcast, but there is much bigger news at play. Finally, at long last, Jeffrey Herlings is a Honda HRC rider, Tim Gajser is a Monster Energy Yamaha factory MXGP rider, and to a lesser extent, Mattia Guadagnini is a Van Venrooy KTM rider, but we may not get to that one. But you know what? If we run out of time, maybe we can even tackle that a little bit. The laughter you heard there would be from my co-host Adam Wheeler, who doesn't seem too enthralled with the idea of dissecting Guadagnini's return to KTM, which is, quite frankly, a sad way to start 2026.
Do we mean Mattia or Ratia?
I forgot about that, but to be honest, Mattia is far gone. It's been only Ratia. Ratia is very posh lately. But now I feel like we're close to going down the rabbit hole with Guadagnini, and we cannot start the podcast in that fashion. So let me first ask you how you're doing, how your off-season's going, and whether you're quite okay.
Not too bad at all, Lewis. Thank you. Belated Happy New Year to you. We knocked out the first Paddock Pass podcast yesterday. I wrapped a story today about a new MotoGP movie that's going to be premiering. Did we talk about this on the podcast recently?
Yeah.
That's coming out in Spain next week. So I just put sort of like 3,000 words out on that, which was pretty cool. And yeah, the MotoGP team launches start in the next few weeks. There's, I think, 6 or 7 teams all doing their unveiling in 6 or 7 days. It's a bit of a mad schedule. And then MXGP, of course. I've been kind of waiting to ask you on this podcast, on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to rephrase that. How excited, or how much were you disturbed by the sight of Jeffrey Herlings in Fox gear, a Bell helmet, I think, and on a red motorcycle? Did it completely throw you on January the 1st?
Well, there's so much to say about this, but I will say it was one of the weirder sights that I've enjoyed in my lifetime. And equally, Giacomo Garibaldi did a brilliant job of keeping us all very informed each step of the way. Maybe too much. I'm sure all of you saw on social media that a sign eventually went up saying no photography and no videography. And I can't help but feel that was a message to the team owner rather than anyone else at play there. And yeah, I was absolutely hooked on every single story, video that was shared. And I'm finally at a point now where it's somewhat familiar to me. In no way is it a comfortable sight. In no way am I over the excitement of it all. But it lived up to the hype, let's say. And as Herling said to me many a time, I think it was akin to Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari for the first time. I think it was that level of intrigue and hype.
I thought it was great, actually. And I think Honda kind of won the PR war in terms of Herlings making his first bow on the CRF compared to Tim Gajser, getting on the Yamaha for the first time. It seemed like Honda kind of had their stuff together. I was a little unsure about some of the photographs that first surfaced. I mean, the Shot by Bravo guys usually do a great job there, but it seemed incredibly dark where they did their photo shoot. And for some reason, Jeffrey was in like a tunnel. And I would have thought if HRC signed an athlete of that ilk, I would put him on a roof somewhere, overlooking like a nice panoramic shot of the world, as if to say sort of the next big step with the record Grand Prix winning athlete of all time.
Well, perhaps symbolic for his KTM tenure was a tunnel, and HRC is the light at the end of that. That's perhaps the narrative that they were trying to orchestrate.
Okay, now, Lewis, if a tunnel means 106 GP wins and 5 World Championships, that's a pretty good tunnel to be in.
Hey, that's the job of a PR master to spin that in that manner. Yeah, fair play to Honda because, as we said many a time, Tim and Jeffrey were both in positions where they couldn't be seen in any of their new colours until January the 1st, or they faced gnarly fines. We're talking millions, far past €1 million, €2 million, for instance. So there was a lot of trepidation around not putting the cart before the horse, let's say. So the photo shoot that Herlings and HRC did was on the morning of January the 1st. So I'd imagine, he rode that day, of course, I would imagine the tunnel was just on the way to the track, next to the track, the closest possible venue. And as you alluded to, it doesn't really matter what HRC did because they simply needed to do something in order to win the PR war because their rival Yamaha was asleep at the wheel. And we got a phone photo.
I mean, props to Herlings because I think he even posted videos of him riding a Red Bull KTM up until like December the 31st. I mean, it was right up until the last day of the year. Of course, it could have been a video from 1 month earlier, but the due diligence was made to the Red Bull sort of KTM image or legacy. And I just thought, the Honda arrangement, even down to Fox being there and Fox producing like a video interview already with Herlings, it was. I think it was a bigger deal that the sort of signing warranted.
Yeah, I would agree. And to the point about the KTM social posts, he was riding the KTM up until I think December the 28th or 29th was his final day. And to his credit, I don't know if you saw this, he actually put out a post and said, I'm riding for the last time in 2025, I think he said, at this track today if any fans want to come out, which I thought was really, really cool. And maybe a little nod to how accessible and unique this sport still is, even at the very highest level. But you equally have to chuckle that KTM, who had announced that he was out at the end of November, are probably shaking their head saying, we never got this much promotion in the 16 years that he was under contract. And now that he's leaving, we're suddenly getting the most promotion that we've ever had. Like, we would have liked this the entire time. But nonetheless, he left no stone unturned. And ultimately, I think all of that was a ploy to make sure that if anyone wanted to try and pull a fast one and fine him or argue that he's violated his contract, he had hard, cold facts to put in front of a jury's face.
I wonder how much he sold his Rebel KTM plastics for at the end of that final day.
I think that's a touchy subject within the pits, actually. Not that he did that. Just the overarching subject. Let's say.
Lewis, I have to say, I thought Herlings looks great on the bike. I mean, he's a class rider anyway. I think he would make some sort of 1970s retro machine look pretty good. And the last kind of videos I've seen of Tim Gajser, I mean, Yamaha. I think as I mentioned, I think Honda shaded the sort of motocross. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think in terms of the attention from the motocross community, Herlings won that kind of battle. But then, the videos that have surfaced of the Slovenian riding, the YZ450F in recent sort of days has been good as well. Gajser already looks incredibly comfortable on that bike. It'll be interesting to know what sort of stage both riders and both teams are at in terms of their testing, because as we know, as you just said, this is the first sort of days and weeks that they're really sort of running laps on them.
Yeah, to your point, did you not believe that Jeffrey looks a lot like Mitch Evans on a Honda? Body
Mitch
size,
Evans?
body language, I don't know. I'm getting very strong Mitch Evans vibes from Herlings at this early stage.
No disrespect to Mitch, but no.
Okay.
Well, I did think this morning actually when I saw some pictures of Tim that that kind of very upright riding style he has reminded me of David Philippart's a little bit on the Yamaha. That's
very good.
I don't know why, but it kind of popped in my head.
Yeah, that's very, very good. I actually see that. I never would have thought of that myself. I do think Tim looks arguably comfier than he did on the Honda. For whatever reason, the cockpit, the rider triangle, something about the Yamaha just seems to suit him. I mean, we don't have lap times, we don't really have any feedback at all. But just simply using the eye test of how he sits into that YZ450FM, it looks almost like a match made in heaven, which is great news for a manufacturer that's had a very checkered couple of years.
Yeah, and we're utterly firmly in the honeymoon period, aren't we? This is like the first weeks where everything is possible. All the requests are being met with the most attention. If you saw the clips of Herlings riding the Honda, it seemed like there was lots of staff, there was lots of attention going on him. And just before we recorded this podcast, Lewis, I gave Marcus De Freitas, the HRC MXGP team manager, a call to get some information, so I can tell you about that in a moment. Quick tangent. Isn't it good that HRC in Lars Lindstrom and Marcus have these team managers that are just very accessible and sort of very compliant when it comes to talking and being open and just being generally helpful when it comes to sort of the scant media attention that there is in the sport. I mean, HRC is, I don't want to say it's a tough nut to crack, but you do have people like Giacomo Garibaldi who loves the spotlight, and he loves kind of the glamour of racing and motorsport at this level. Roger Harvey, of course, like a mutual friend of ours, been in the game for so many years. It seems like HRC is just not only a top flight team, but they are, a very, I don't know, a well-equipped organization. So I want to give props. And then, of course, we know all about Lars and the Lawrence brothers and the whole sort of setup in the US. It seems like HRC is the, I don't know, like one of the premium banner wavers for how things should be done in the paddock.
Yeah, I'd say that's without doubt. And from top to bottom as well, like some teams, the management is accessible, the riders aren't. Some teams the opposite, whereas as you alluded to, HRC is kind of solid across the board. Certainly a far departure from the rigid structure that they once operated with Pichon and the Martin team and whatever else.
I mean, there's still that veneer. If you go into the Grand Prix paddock and you see all these kind of goldfish bowls and semis parked up of HRC, there is a sort of, there's like an aloof feeling which, or kind of an exclusivity that you're nervous about sort of penetrating. But the reality is that the staff there and the people there, just are very accommodating. I mean, the Japanese can seem quite sort of cold because they're busy just getting on with one aspect of motorsport. But yeah, I mean, it seems that, with Herlings, they know there's a great deal of attention coming onto the team and the brand. And, the guys are in a good place to deal with that.
Yeah, let's say that from the outside looking in and the limited information that we both have, it seems like Honda very much realise this Herlings experiment cannot fail. It will be a very big black eye on our organisation, and therefore they are quite literally throwing the kitchen sink at this. And I think Herlings is even a little bit taken aback as to how many people are there for his test days. I know there was 18 there on one day. I think at its peak, I think there were 25 people from Honda there for a test day. And this is quite a departure for Herlings as well, because we know he's a little bit of an introvert. I think that's fair to say. Does his own thing, likes his own program. He was on a very stock-based motorcycle at KTM the last year or two and hadn't really done a test with KTM per se in 2 years. He said to me the other day, this is his first real test, if you want to call it that, in 2 years.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of Gajser and Herlings, we mentioned it numerous times when we learned that they would be changing teams, is fascinating. I mean, I mentioned earlier on the honeymoon period, and this is going to be true, Lewis, because there is going to be extra spotlight on these guys and how they adapt. And we all know that sort of, looking great at the test track and running laps and small sprint motos might be all right. But once we get into sort of the heat of GP competition, and you need to go against somebody like Roman Febvre, who's sort of firmly established in the Kawasaki team as a defending champion, it's going to be no easy task at all. It was slightly odd seeing Tim in sort of full Alpine Stars gear, because that's sort of the vision we've had of Herlings for the last few years. You're right, he is kind of introverted. He usually comes to the MXGP start gate right at the end, with helmet and goggles in place. So there's no kind of small talk. There's no conversation going on, really. He's not hanging out in the gate and, making chit chat with other riders and sort of press guys or guests. So I think Herlings is going to have to deal once again with, being the main focal point of MXGP in its position that he's well accustomed to. But also, his credentials as a test rider and a development rider are really going to sort of be put to the fore now. And one thing that Marcus was saying to me was that HRC gave him a stock bike just to ride on the first days of the 2026 and the initial sort of induction into Honda, so that he can get a feel for the chassis, for the handling, everything else. And then since then, they've been going into a pretty intense testing schedule. They had 3 days. Marcus said, we spent sort of 12 days going through, so 12 hours each day going through all the minor details. He said that Herlings and Gajser are very sort of similar in terms of their professionalism. But whereas Tim, like Jeffrey was at KTM, would have specific requests each year, Herlings, of course, is starting from an absolute sort of zero ground level, knowledge of HRC and even different motorcycles. So he's full of questions, and I think HRC are quite relishing the difference and the challenge being put to them to get him comfortable. But Marcus also said, I don't think he's going to give me any news of any setbacks or any areas of concern at this point. But he did say that he was shocked by how kind of easily they managed to find a base setting where he felt comfortable. And the benefit, of course, is that Herlings has that much experience that he's going to know when a package is slightly off. When it comes to things like sorting out electronics for race starts, then that's another thing. But then, this is a guy that knows what he needs from a motorcycle. So I don't think he's going to be stumbling in the wilderness for that long. He did also say that HRC would have all 4 riders at the Mantova preseason race. So if there's any Italian-based motocross fans or even European-based motocross fans who want to see Herlings for the first time, as well as Tom Vial, as well as Ruben Fernandez and Valerio Latta on the 250, then you need to get to Mantova. Herlings and Vial will also do the Hawkstone Park International in the UK, whereas Fernandez and the Italian will be doing a couple of Spanish championship races. So, that's it. I mean, there's not going to be that much time or that many opportunities to get things into the ballpark before Argentina.
I presume Mantova is before Hawkstone, because Hawkstone is the middle of February. So I presume Mantova must be the first or second weekend.
I haven't checked. I only spoke with Marcus about an hour ago. But yeah, I'd assume so.
Yeah, that's normally how it shakes out. To your point, I think Herlings is a good test rider, maybe not the best in the world. Who knows if we're heading into that thin air. But I think he's a good test rider. But I think a big part of his KTM time was that he had a lot of trust in the people who he allowed into his inner circle. So whilst he had his own opinion and whatnot, I think he also trusted the answers to the questions he would put out. And I would argue that maybe this falls under the introvert sort of category, but I think that would maybe be the biggest hurdle with HRC, just building that trust and flicking a switch in Herling's mind where he's like, X person does know me so well that they know what I want when I give this feedback. But that's also true of any team, isn't it? And from what I gather, started on Gajser's bike from last year and is now into the 2027 prototype full factory machine, which is maybe why...
I think it's a 28. It might be the 28 prototype, but it's the same bike that Ruben Fernandez was riding in the latter half of 2025. Gajser was not riding it. So I kind of asked Marcus, what so far is the main difference between the 84 race bike and the 243 race bike? And he said, well, it's a little bit of a reset because Gajser just didn't have that brand new bike that Fernandez was kind of trialing. He wasn't too specific otherwise. It seems that they do have a base, but then, of course, there's still more work to be done because we're only talking on, the 13th day of January. So there's still some hard weeks and hard miles to be done. But like you say, Lewis, I'll be really interested to sort of, it's probably very unlikely, but tap into some of Herlings' mindset in the next month or two, because, he's going to discover some very capable people like Massimo and Shentz and the technicians at HRC, where he might think, damn, maybe I should have made this switch a bit earlier in my career to develop as a professional and a racer. Whereas we know that he stayed at Red Bull KTM for very lucrative contracts, as well as that familiarity where he almost didn't have to test. The guys knew exactly what he needed. So when WP came up with a new solution or KTM changed their chassis philosophy, they were quickly able to sort of get it into some sort of shape where Herlings was happy. I think he has his old practice mechanic, Dave. He's sort of moved across with him to Honda. So that's all part of that transition process. But we're talking so much about Herlings, Lewis. I was watching the video of Gajser on the Yamaha, and it did make me think, between Tim Gajser and Maxime Renault, is that the strongest MXGP team this year?
Oh,
it has to be, right?
Well, if you're going to compare to HRC, I think you have to remove Fernandez because, of course, they've got one extra rider, so that tips the scales. So if you want to do a straight comparison between Gajser and Renault and Herlings and Vial, I think that's tough.
Renault's an MX2 world champion. Okay, he doesn't have the Supercross titles,
but
and Vial has one more. But then Renault is also an MXGP winner. MXGP GP winner.
But Renault is also not the Renault that we once knew and loved at this point in time.
And he's kind of a little bit in the naughty corner.
Yes, you forget about that. That is an interesting story to follow. But I do hear that Tim and Renault are, of course, on the new frame now. They've moved on from the 2025 machine that they steered, and supposedly it's much more positive for Renault. So maybe we get a better Renault, a happier Renault in 26, and maybe, just maybe, he is quite happy that he was made to stay at Yamaha. I actually spoke a little bit to Paolo Ciapatti about the way that the Renault thing came down to the wire, let's say. He kind of just was dismissive of the whole situation and kept shaking his head. I think he was in a little bit of disbelief at how he lost Renault, because at one point he very much had him, I think it's fair to say. So I think he feels like he's a child who's had his sweets taken away a little bit.
Well, compared to Yamaha, I think the strongest possible lineup might be Kawasaki. Paul Jonas, with the experience that he has and the fact that he's also a GP winner in both classes, and then Roman Febvre is a defending world champion, I might be tempted to put the Green Boys ahead of maybe HRC. I don't know.
I think you're down on HRC, and therefore I think it all boils down to Vial, doesn't it?
There is a degree of proven results or pedigree in the other brands, whereas HRC is completely new.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't know. I feel like Vial is going to be a perfectly acceptable and successful number 2. I think that realistically he could be the number 1 rider on a factory team. I think he's a slam dunk in the number 2 position. And I do think the Herlings will be Herlings for the most part. From what I hear, my sources on the inside tell me hardpack is going incredibly well. Prefers a Honda on hardpack compared to the KTM, steering and whatever else. It's all very, very good. I think sand, there's still some work to do in order to get him as comfortable on the Honda as he was on the KTM, but then we all know how phenomenal he was on the KTM, so he's not going to hop on a new bike and go, yeah, I'm now 1 second a lap faster around Rommel. What a surprise. That would naturally take some time. But yeah, I think I would tip the scales in Honda's direction, maybe slightly influenced by the fact that Yamaha is in a little bit more of a show-me state compared to the other manufacturers.
Yes. Yeah. It's going to be cool. I think, it would be good just to see those two teams and brands go at it. Never mind adding, Lucas Kuhnen at KTM, Andrea Adamo as well. He's going to be another sort of interesting rookie to chart. The Ducatis, of course, into their second year. Kai de Wolf on the Husqvarna. This is ridiculous because it's not even like an MXGP preview show, but now that we're kind of seeing the riders and their colors and on the different bikes, it's just bringing it a little bit kind of closer. Yeah,
I have to say, we just had Anaheim 1, as I said, but my excitement for Argentina far eclipses Anaheim 1 on this occasion. This is lightning in a bottle.
Thanks to sort of Oscar Pivas, like a liaison and sort of uber fan of Argentine sort of motocross, or MXGP, I should say, sent over some pictures of the Bariloche Technical Park site where the new track is going to be built. And it kind of looks like a very strange place. It's a bit of just like a very flat industrial park. There's clearly quite some work needed to be done. I'd be far more enthusiastic about Neuquén or even Cordoba. But, I'm obviously going to wait until everything is built and ready, but it's not that far away.
No, it's actually funny. Like, we have just started the Herlings Honda HRC experiment, but even Hawkstone is a month away now. Like, the season we are very much sat on the doorstep of the season, I think it's fair to state. And that puts a lot of pressure on Infront with the Argentine venue, and Herlings and Gajser with their respective teams. One more thing on Herlings and Gajser, actually, this goes in tandem. I had a few people mention to me that they were very, very surprised that Gajser was allowed to go public with Yamaha with just stock plain Alpine Stars gear on. A lot of people said to me that they were very surprised that Alpine Stars would allow that and they wouldn't have him sublimated 243 jerseys for the first shots. So that's a bit of a surprise, and another credit to Fox and Honda HRC, because they very much had everything ready to go for Herlings. Printed jerseys. Kenny Day from Fox on the American side spent the first 6 days of January there just running through boots, helmets and all of that with Herlings to make sure that he's incredibly comfortable. So yeah, that stood out to people. But I will say, equally, going back to my Mitch Evans comment, I was a little bit sad that Herlings did just look like a very stock Honda HRC rider, like Tom Vial or like Mitch Evans. You know, we've seen Herlings with the famous Dutch flag in the 84 on his jersey time and time again. Just a little touch like that would have just, you know, satisfied my urges a little bit more.
Maybe it will happen at the official sort of photo shoot, if there's going to be one. Maybe prior to the first GP as well. I think just for that first initial launch, Lewis, it was all right. And for Gajser, I imagine, you know, it's a team deal, isn't it, with Alpine Stars and Yamaha? So he was probably wearing some gear, some pre-season gear. But yeah, it's maybe a little bit odd to explain. But I think the PR presence is kind of outweighed a little bit by how good sort of Tim is looking. You know, it would be nice to see some extra material, but so far I think it seems to be full of promise, if I can say that.
Yeah, I'm already completely accustomed to Tim on the Yamaha, even though I believe his first day on the bike was January the 8th, so a little bit later than Herlings even. And we've had much fewer videos in comparison to Herlings, but I'm far more down the road with Tim on Yamaha as far as just being accustomed to it than I am Herlings on Honda. And I don't know why that is. There isn't really a reason for that, other than it just seems to fit to me, as I said off the top, which is a nice sign.
I think maybe we shouldn't be listened to that much. Maybe our opinions are somewhat off, because we were urging Monster to make a big deal of the Jorge Prado signing, and look how that ended up.
Well, I think that's a very negative way to look at it, Adam. I don't know what's happening. I think I've spoken about it. I mean, I guess we can talk about it. I was under the impression that Herlings and Vial are going to be Monster helmet riders. I presume that isn't there yet, just simply because Monster are going to make a big deal with the announcement and run their own program, unless the deal fell through. But
I thought Herlings was staying Red Bull.
No. I've told you about the Monster thing, haven't I?
No. I thought kind of Honda or HRC MXGP was softening their stance on energy drinks to sort of placate the Dutchman.
And as a result, Monster is going to be on Herlings' head. It was my understanding. And again, I was a little bit taken aback when that wasn't there on day one, January 1. But so either the deal fell through or they're waiting for their own announcement. But I'm still under the impression, I mean, I could quite easily just ask, but I think I've been told by both parties, let's say, Monster helmet for Tom and Jeffrey. And Tim. Even my misstep by saying Tim actually turned out to be a happy accident. So look at that. And congrats to Monster, because if all of this plays out, Monster, who have been at the mercy of Red Bull for decades in MXGP, are just stacking the deck. All they need to do is take down Koonen and De Wolf. Which is...
That's still some task.
Yes, but with Febvre, Herlings and Gajser in your cabinet, I'd like to think that it is entirely possible.
As well as Renault and Vial and Fernandez.
And there must be some others. There must be some others in there. Monster are really stacking the deck. I think that's the best way to put it. And actually, in more optic changes, Febvre is moving from just one gear to shot. Jonas has moved from just one to TLD. And
so Kawasaki don't have Team Deal anymore?
No.
Interesting.
Well, no. Fun fact. Jonas and Febvre were both just one last year. It was never a team deal. Febvre had his own gear deal with just one, and consequently, well, not even consequently, just separate to that, just one reached a team deal with Kawasaki.
Oh, right. So that's the best scenario for a rider, isn't it? When they can double up. I mean, if you can get some sort of recompense from the team as well as a personal deal, which is how the energy drinks work sometimes, because you might have Monster Energy Yamaha, but then, you know, Maxime Renault will have his own personal deal with Monster as well. That's all the better for them.
Yeah, I said, I don't know if this is still how it works now, but originally, Febvre had his own gear deal. The MX2 team at Kawasaki was its own team gear deal. And then the MXGP team gear deal was just Jonas. And I said to Jonas, like, who allowed you to sign this contract? Like, how can the team decide on a team gear deal when the team is just you? Like, you should get your own gear. I mean, easier said than done. I think in this market, Jonas would probably very much struggle to get any sort of budget for his own gear deal. But yeah, it was
It's good that TLD are doing it. I mean, when were they last sort of significantly in the paddock? Would it have been with the Yamaha boys?
Yeah, well, of course, they're still with Yamaha MX2, but that is a shadow of its former self. So their heyday, if you want to call it that, was when Kimia was MX2. The Renault world title, Ben Watson's 2 GP wins and multiple podiums. And Gertz, of course, did his bit. But I think TLD have never been the same since they lost Ben Watson. I think that's fair. And actually, this is a lovely segue. So you'll probably know more about this than me, but the FIM have new helmet rules for this year. You aware?
Have they? I thought it was just new homologation stage phase for approval of helmets.
Something like that.
It's just the next level.
But
we're looking very uninformed at the moment.
Well, that is, of course, whatever the rule is, whatever the new standard is, whatever. That's why Herlings and Viau are in Bell, because the Fox helmet hasn't yet passed that threshold. And the TLD helmet, last time I checked, is also struggling to get past that. So the Yamaha MX2 boys, for instance, who would be in TLD helmets, will wear Alpine Stars helmets in the interim. I know that...
Well, TLD is part of the Shark group, isn't it? So they're kind of part of the same group of brands.
Really?
But,
Shark?
But yeah, I think they were bought by Shark. I could be wrong.
Well,
if also Bell...
that may be true, but TLD bought it back. Then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, Bell and Fox,
Bell have
of course.
that proprietary flex system or spherical. I'm probably getting mixed up now. But I'm surprised about Fox because they've always sort of aligned with MIPS. And I wonder kind of how that would be going forward, because you'd assume that any kind of MIPS equipment would pass any kind of standards that FIM have.
Well, yeah, and I actually, funny you mention that, because I said this to someone at Anaheim 1. There's so much, of course, the Fly Formula S now with the smart technology is another world, and I was shown or informed at the weekend about another type of smart technology that's going to be in another helmet brand here coming up, similar to the Fly Formula, just, slightly different in certain areas, maybe enhanced in others, inferior in others. And I said to this person, do you feel like MIPS are maybe falling behind a little bit and not moving with the wave quick enough? And they said no, but there's definitely the potential for that. I mean, I guess that sounds like I'm hinting that the FIM rules revolve around smart technology. They don't. But just as a wider conversation, I do wonder if MIPS could fall victim to maybe just being so content with what they've got that others perhaps overtake them with new technology.
No, I actually asked the CEO this when he made a visit to Lommel, the Belgian GP last year, and they're still pushing ahead with development. But the thing about them as an ingredient brand is that for helmet brands that can't quite venture down the costly R&D route to make their own, say, rotational acceleration solutions inside the lids and pass this FIM homologation, it's a fine sort of compromise. I mean, things get even more technical, then I guess MIPS will have to step up, but I think they're in a pretty damn good place. I have my Fly helmet behind me actually there, as you can probably see in the video. Most comfortable helmet I've ever worn. But I was also, if we're talking about new stuff, Lewis, I saw that 6D have a fantastic helmet themselves, also have some new goggles, and that was quite impressive with the way that it kind of creates this seal inside the 6D lids. I don't know how practical it is, but I thought it was quite a cool concept. And it looks good.
Yeah, I don't know if this was intentional, but I was taken aback when I first saw it because there was no rumbling of this. I didn't see a PR, and kind of perhaps a nice example of how PR media is still critical in this day and age, because the first time I saw it was with Freddie Noren, I think it is, at Anaheim 1, and I had no context for what I was seeing. But it is an interesting concept, and it's surprising that others haven't already gone down the route of making a goggle that is exclusive to the same helmet manufacturer, and therefore the fit is unprecedented. Because, of course, Alpine Stars make helmets and goggles, but the Alpine Stars goggles can be worn with any helmet. And it's my understanding that a 6D goggle is exclusive to the 6D helmet. It won't fit or work anywhere else, which is an all-new idea, but one that actually makes a lot of sense. You could almost call it common sense.
Yeah, I mean, it means 60 fans and customers will be able to get the whole package in the same way that I'm sure, TLD or Alpine Stars or Fox fans are buying shirts and pants. They're not necessarily just buying one item. But then, of course, from a 6D perspective, in terms of marketing, it's not, or rather commercial viability, it's not enormous, is it? Because, people could buy the goggles still and it won't fit with their Fox V4 or V3 or whatever.
I actually don't know what helmet Roman is going to wear in 26. You would presume not just one, unless they've done a helmet-specific deal. But last I heard, he was negotiating with 6D. So maybe
Okay.
6D will appear at the top end of MXGP once more.
He was wearing for a number of years. I'm trying to remember the brand. I can't think. It begins with a K.
Oh,
but I mean, he had a couple.
KYT.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was possibly, but he had a couple of concussions, didn't he? And
Yeah, that
that's when
helmet
he
looked
wanted
like
to change. Yeah.
that helmet looked like it cost $10 at a flea market. I would honestly
Yeah.
call a spade a spade. If I go riding, I wouldn't have put my head in that helmet. Fair play to Roman for doing it for so many years, and from what I understand, he was paid handsomely for that.
Yeah, I mean, even like the aero lids, they look great. You could say. I mean, depends. It's in the eye of the beholder. But the way that they were so light, I often had sort of my doubts about it. But yeah, you can't argue with the science now behind helmets, and it is good that the FIM is still pushing ahead and doing stuff. And one of the sort of topics I was asking the FIM staff when I was at a couple of GPs last year was about airbags and development of safety tech. And I wouldn't be surprised if for 2026 MXGP we have a couple more upgrades or intents to make riding even safer.
Well, all of that could be accelerated now because after the Justin Barsha crash, which, although not proven, I am of the opinion the airbag had to have made a massive impact on him being okay. I refuse to believe otherwise. You've got to think that will only push the concept, the technology, the acceptance of it into the mainstream, into the hands of the powers that be much, much quicker. That's one of those era-defining crashes, technology-defining crashes that will become a reference point in presentations and whatnot, brochures and whatever else for maybe the next 100 years,
It's also, it made me think about neck braces again. I mean, people should look at this stuff. I think Barsha was even wearing a neck brace for quite a few years. Yes, they have their alleged disadvantages, but then, if it keeps you safe and allows you to walk out of hospital after an accident like that, then it makes it's a no-brainer.
Yes, indeed. Switching gears a little bit here, I did receive word last week that Infront sent out an email to all teams, essentially asking what they were doing, because they had less OAT, officially approved teams, signed up for the 26th season than ever before, which is an interesting concept because there is some proof behind this because typically we get the OAT list before Christmas. I don't know if it's ever been as late as this. So there is some proof of concept there. But curious because I don't know why MXGP would care to a degree. Like, it doesn't make a difference to them how many they have signed up at this point. And I also don't know why there wouldn't be as many signed up because we haven't really lost any teams. I haven't gained any either, but I can't think of where that discrepancy would be. But I was quite intrigued to hear that Infront were maybe a little bit panicked by the landscape at the moment.
Well, I mean, they want that exclusivity, and that's why the OAT list exists. But I mean, that's a pretty good sort of inside gossip there, Lewis. If there are less teams, then also it means like a statement of intent, doesn't it? Maybe some teams are just hanging on. They're waiting for final budgets. They're waiting for final confirmation if they can actually do like a 20 GP season with extra flyaway dates. And I'm sure the final phase of 2025, where it was Turkey, China, Australia, and then of course, for the riders where it applied head into the US for the nations, it was a tough end to the year.
Yeah, and of course we know now that entry fees have reduced on a race-by-race basis. Previously €1,000, now they've been €300 for some time. So perhaps teams I think in that regard, the OAT structure used to be a deal. Like if you had the funds to pay up front and get ahead, then it was certainly cheaper than paying on a race by race basis. But maybe now teams are like, you know what, we'll just pay the €300 and take it as we come. Because also, being signed up as an officially approved team does commit you to going to the flyaways. It does commit you to certain parameters. And I feel like we've said this for a while. I still don't know, and I need to find out what the punishment is from Infront if an OAT team just doesn't go overseas or whatever else. But there must be something there, because otherwise everyone would do it. It's €10,000 per rider. So if you're Honda HRC, that's 20 or 30,000, 40 MX2 as well, €40,000. If you're Dirt Store Triumph with Ben Watson, that's €10,000.
Yeah, I mean it has been the same for like 10 years or something. I mean, I don't think Infront have really adjusted for inflation, which is to their credit. Should it even be there in the first place? Tough to say. Depends on your philosophy. But the fee itself does cover stuff like passes for the season, like covering up to 20 GPs. It was like a package deal, and it was justified. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's just an extra step too far for teams at the moment. I don't know.
Yeah, well, if you crunch the numbers, if it's €10,000 per rider, that works out as €500 per round to be entered. Of course, that's more money than the €300 to be a wild card, if you want to call it that. But then, as you said, as an OAT team, you get more passes, preferred parking in the paddock, help to go overseas with freight allowance and whatnot. There are perks to it. Previously, that was what secured you the team report on MXGP TV, but they don't do that anymore, praise the Lord. So that isn't in there. So yeah, I think the biggest difference now is there is a competitive advantage, because yes, it's rare, and I think some of the MXGP naysayers will roll their eyes at this point, but now when there are a certain number of riders, more than 40, you do have the OAT practice and the wildcard practice. And in that instance, Trentino, Argentina were case studies for this in 25. If you are first in the wildcard practice, and that puts you second in the OAT practice, irrelevant. You're first in the wildcard practice, you go to the gate behind the last OAT rider for the qualifying race. I've been involved with this with a couple of riders this off-season who want to be OAT simply because the rider is like, I need that practice. I can't go out there with lesser talent, you know? Because if you are MXGP mainstay, a former GP winner, whatever else, it is detrimental to A, not have gate pick for qualifying, but also to not be on track at the same time as your speed range guys. You know, you're not learning, you're not being dragged along by the competition, you're kind of isolated.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they can pick out guys, you know, in maybe MX2 and see what the fast ones are doing, but otherwise, you know, they want to be having a look at to see the sort of lines and the strategies that their supposed equal or superior peers are doing. So it's a good shout, Lewis. I don't know how that's going to play out this year, but the OAT thing, it's good that it has some validation. It's good that, you know, if Infront of making teams commit to that thing, then it has some purpose, has some value. And the media landscape, like you said, the TV report well over 10 years ago was seen as a bit of currency because it gave teams, especially sort of satellite teams or private teams, some exposure. Now, I think Infront could maybe be a bit more versatile or a bit more flexible with that and say, listen, you can take over our social channels for a day when you're launching your team, or we'll give you X amount of posts or whatever, because obviously the accumulated MXGP following on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is going to be far bigger than any team or brand, unless you're counting Monster Energy. But the chance of, say, Maxime Renault having a specific MXGP post on the Monster channel where there might be 30 million followers is very slim. So maybe that's how it has to be now.
Yeah, and to build on what you just said, so valuable was the previous team report that I worked with Louis Voster's, the Wilvo team, before he became factory Yamaha. And he would message me and say, Infront just said I can have my team report at the Dutch GP. Do you think I should do it then, or should I wait for a later GP? Like, it was that valuable in the eyes of these private team owners. And I don't necessarily know if that's been replaced per se. Now, call a spade a spade. I never thought it was valuable. I always thought it was dumb. So I'm not contradicting myself. But that is how some of the powers that be in the paddock viewed it. Of course, I'd imagine, I don't know, I'm trying to think back. I wonder if you're a wild card, per se, does that stop you getting interviewed by Lisa on the start line before the race? I wonder.
Does it depend on your name as well?
I think it is just random, because I'm thinking like she's interviewed Lars van Berkel many a time and he's never been on an officially approved team, so that can't be the case. I was just spitballing.
You just want to talk about Kevin Bruman again?
Honestly, that was just on my mind, because if there's one man who will always be on that OAT list, he'll be there. He's probably the first signed up every year. Who knows where the money comes from? But it's Kevin Bruman. And you know
Good
what?
old Kev.
Infront probably have a photo of him in their office as a shining example of what they want their riders and teams to be. We're in the nitty-gritty of Infront and MXGP now, so let's dive a little bit deeper. The recent MSMA meeting, which is what does it stand for? Motorcycle Manufacturer?
Motorcycle Sport Manufacturers Association?
There we go. This is why Adam's here. So the MSMA had their meeting, I think, pre-Christmas sometime, and all of the factories had representatives there. And I think, from what I hear, a big topic was the cost of overseas racing. And there's a bit of push and pull here between Infront and the manufacturers, because the costs are going up, of course, just with inflation, but also the teams are pushing limits with backdrops and toolboxes and spares, and the teams... Call a spade, once again, the slogan of this podcast. A lot of these factory teams are owned by millionaires, and therefore it's a bit of a vanity exercise going overseas and having the coolest setup. You and I have both done flyaways where there is talk from other teams of, did you see what this team brought? Did you see how much money they spent? For instance, it still sticks out in my mind, Qatar 2017, or would that have been 16, I guess, when Everts first took control of Suzuki. All the talk in the paddock was about their overseas setup and how have Suzuki got that sort of budget. In fact, I distinctly remember someone in the pits telling me Suzuki aren't going to play that game for long. They don't want to spend that much money, which was quite the foreshadowing. But anyway, there's push and pull between the manufacturers and Infront, because the manufacturers are saying to Infront, this is all costing too much. You need to help us more. And Infront is saying, we're not asking you to take these fancy toolboxes and backdrops and whatever else. As I think I've said before, Infront have said to me, in an ideal world, they would just have every team take one bike, no spare, and a toolbox, and then everyone can go for virtually no cost, and everyone's happy. So it's chicken and egg situation. I don't know how that plays out, but ultimately I think that works into the fabric of the MXGP landscape, where you're never going to find a resolution, you're never going to make everyone happy, because everyone has a different agenda, a different aim, a different want, and to get everyone on the same page in MXGP and elsewhere in the world is just impossible. So the complaints will continue for as long as they need to.
The Achilles heel of the paddock is just a disparity between the teams. You might have a team with a huge title sponsor who feels that they need to have an expensive setup to justify the expectations of that sponsor. And then you might have a smaller team like Jackie Martins's that has a series of small sponsors and then has different kind of priorities. Then you also have teams that are maybe a bit more proficient in terms of finding that backing, and some that don't make any effort or misallocate their funds. Maybe they're more interested in putting on fancy hospitality or inviting unnecessary guests or whatever, instead of putting it into different areas of the team. Because there's all these different priorities and different approaches and different generations, in fact, of team owners and bosses. That's why, you get to a meeting like that, and it must be hard for Infront to really pick and find a majority and say, well, what do we need to do? I think if Infront do want to make more of a world championship, and the calendar looks awesome in terms of its geographical spread, then there has to be some more support for the team. It's just to ensure you don't get a ridiculous sight of having 18 riders, a far-flung Grand Prix, where MXGP has been exposed for the first time, or the first time in many years. They have to invest, while they're investing in the credibility of the sport by going to these places, they also have to invest in the image of the sport by ensuring that the teams and the participants are there. But then the teams also have their responsibility to not always be going cup in hand and to have their own initiatives to, justify the billing of a World Championship MXGP team.
Deep in the weeds. I know of a team that went to Indonesia for the double header with 2 bikes, 1 toolbox, 1 rider, and it costs them €1,250. So it is possible to go overseas. I could go overseas for €1,250. So it is possible. It's just where does competition meet vanity, I guess, or where, I don't know what those elements are, where they blend or whatever, but that's kind of where the argument sits, because Infront ultimately doesn't care. They're like, we just need you to be there. We don't really care what you look like, just be there. And the teams are like,
that's what we were saying in the show before Christmas as well. There has to be more of an effort towards diplomacy. And while there are stories like Zach Osborne having to sort of sleep in a tent at the Russian GP because he couldn't find any decent accommodation and it was in the middle of nowhere, or say Max Anstey racing, for a very prominent Kawasaki satellite team in Brazil, having to share a hotel room and sleep in the bathroom using one of his sort of brothers or sisters' nappies as a pillow so he could actually get some kit before the race. There are those kind of stories of that's not really how like an elite Grand Prix World Championship series should be kind of operating, you'd think. But yeah, Lewis, we're trying to fix the world here, it seems. And, if there's far smarter people than you and I in a business sense and also in a sports promotion capacity who haven't really been able to find a sensible solution because the money is just not there in terms of Infront being able to slap a big wad of cash down in front of all the teams and say, yeah, let's go racing.
Agreed. Well said. But I think my overarching takeaway from all of this, and maybe my point for bringing it up, is Infront, David Luongo takes a lot of blame for MXGP being quote-unquote broken. And maybe it is broken. But I think everyone plays a role for not being able to get on the same page. Does that mean they should get on the page that Infront wants? No. But there has to be
how would you define broken? I mean, we've had Ducati, two manufacturers coming in. Yes, you could say Ducati haven't thrown a huge wad of XGP, and Triumph have sort of fed their way in, as you would expect, because there has to be some sort of longevity, because that's going to be good for both the brands and the series. Is MXGP broken? I think the worst thing is just not really seeing full gates. But then, as you and I have said on podcasts, make the gates smaller if you don't want that kind of image.
Yeah, broken may be a bit aggressive. Fractured, maybe. And I say that simply because of the...
Imperfect.
The distaste in the paddock, the complaints in the paddock, the general sense of unease that exists. And for instance, I've said many a time, 2022, in my opinion, was a very big low point for MXGP. It really was. That's my personal opinion. I feel like the last couple of years, it's risen back up and found a level of stability. But I'm surprised to hear that some teams and whatnot don't agree with me. So that gives me that fractured feel, But yeah, I do believe it's not all down to Infront, and I don't think that should be the narrative. It just is a case of not everyone can get on the same page. So everyone decides to take a blame. Maybe even, you know what, Adam? Maybe even you and I can take a bit of blame. I don't know how or why, but let's, in the interest of everyone being one and coming together, let's take the first step. Maybe we can fix MXGP by holding our hands up, saying, we take our blame. Maybe we'll start a trend.
I think, Lewis, for the first MXGP show of the year, we're going a little bit too deep into this thing.
Yeah,
now.
Good though, isn't it?
And I think we need to get more of a barometer of the paddock, both at the start of the year and also maybe during the middle and towards the end, to see how like another jet-setting campaign is wearing on the participants.
The tide took us far out to sea, so I'm going to attempt to swim back. Was there anything else?
Have you got any DC shoes yet?
What? Sorry.
Have you got any DC shoes yet?
No, coming soon. Coming soon. Yes, coming soon. I'll be flexing them in my pizza reviews each and every week on social media.
I saw that actually. It popped up on the Pulp MX. You and Steve taking a bite of pizza in some strange location. It has to be said. It looked like someone had sort of pushed you out the door. Yeah, but it was kind of a bit desolate, and I thought it was a bold effort at different content, but it was a bit bland. I hope the pizza was not bland.
Well, as with anything, day one at school, whatever else, there's always room for improvement. Maybe it's broken. I hold my hand up. But Feld have actually bought into the concept quite aggressively. They want it. So...
Well, that means better food for you. But I
Yes.
think you need to be commenting on the texture of the pizza, the salty taste, the strength of the tomato sauce, the quantity of cheese, perhaps, the chewiness of the dough. There's all sorts of comments that you could be doing there.
Yes, and while we're promoting things, please join my WhatsApp channel. New for 2026 is on the drive back from press day and race day, whatever events, MXGP eventually, but Supercross for now, of course. On the drive back from the track to the hotel, I record a voice note, which is essentially the quickest podcast you will ever get. It is a raw, rapid reaction to insight and observations from the track that day. There's no way to get information quicker. It's much more informal, personal, you could say. I talk like I'm talking to my friends, which some will hate and some will love. But join it because it's a new concept and we need more new concepts in this sport. So, give us
Isn't that
some
a bit perilous at the wheel?
Well, you know, Adam, you know me, I tend to put myself in danger for the people. I'm a man of the people.
You're a good driver, Lou, so I think you'll be all right. But don't get too passionate when you're trying to negotiate a busy junction.
Yeah, well, I did get, first day of doing that, Anaheim 1 press day, I did get lost on the way back to the hotel because I was trying to follow the map and do a voice note and drive, and so the podcast ended up being 5 minutes longer than it should have been. But
is it true, if we're moving into, there's a final part of this podcast and talking about Anaheim 1, is it true that when Jorge Prado jumped across the finish line and made his shush gesture, he was looking in your direction?
No, because I don't.
No? Okay.
No, I don't. I don't know if I'm Team Jorge or not Team Jorge. I can't figure it out. Honestly, I will.
Kidding.
I will ask him this weekend because the narrative in the paddock is there's a camp that believes that I'm pro Jorge more than anyone in the world, and basically he walks on water in my eyes. And there's another camp that believes my sole intention of going to the races is to destroy his career. So
how's that possible?
Yeah, well, ultimately I think that means I'm incredibly neutral. It's the same as everything. I get a lot of shit, right? I get a lot of shit for talking good about Chase and being his friend and whatever else. But I also get comments every single week saying that I'm so disrespectful to Chase and that I need to respect him more. And I'm like, well, then why are people complaining that I'm respecting him too much? It's a way of the world. It's a way of the world. But before we get to Anaheim 1, did you miss anything from Marcus that you wanted to share? Because we did get sidetracked quite aggressively.
Aside from the fact that, he was pleasantly surprised how quickly they made progress with Jeffrey, in terms of getting the CRF going, no, not. I think I pretty much relayed everything that he said. Of course, they did the testing with Fernandez on the prototype, as we mentioned, in races at the back end of 2025. They also did some more work with the Spaniard. Then Tom Vial they did in November, and then Tom, of course, raced at the Paris Supercross. So they're more advanced with those two. So all their attention has been on Herlings for the last couple of weeks. They were testing for a week in Spain, and then they will be going back to Spain next week for more work.
Any word on if all of the riders or all of the 450 riders will be on the prototypes?
Yes.
Okay. Equally interesting, eagle-eyed viewers on social media would have noticed that Herlings was running a fat bar on one day with Honda rather than his trusty twin walls. My source tells me that was a request from Honda just for the purpose of testing. But it was quite...
So he's going to switch back?
Yes, I believe so. But as breathtaking as seeing Herlings on a Honda and in Fox gear, I was equally as shocked to see him using a fat bar. That was arguably more surprising to me than the Honda Fox launch. But anyway, as we close the curtain on this episode of the MXGP podcast show and bid you a fond there. As we close the curtain on this MXGP podcast show and bid you a fond farewell, I've had multiple requests after Anaheim 1 for Adam to move to America and join me in tandem covering SMX so this podcast can break out of MXGP and become a global motocross situation, which, to be honest, would be brilliant, wouldn't it? If we could do this podcast for MXGP and America and make it into a bigger franchise, if you want to call it that, it would be great. But alas, you are firmly entrenched in slick tyres. But alas, people have requested your perspective, your opinion on Anaheim 1. So take it away.
Oh, my opinion on Anaheim 1. Heavens, where to begin? Well, we have to talk about the sort of double MXGP world champion and that podium finish. I would have loved to have been not even a fly on the wall. I would have loved to have been sitting next to you and the likes of Steve and hearing sort of Jason Wygant and the rest of the guys ponder this podium finish by Jorge Prado, Lewis. For me, it was a little bit of vintage Prado, wasn't it? I mean, there was the strong start, the steady rhythm, the lots of looking over the shoulder when he realized there were a couple of faster riders coming through. But otherwise, there was just that precision and a little bit of that kind of swagger to take that result. And I'm really happy for him. I think, it was exactly sort of the result that he needed right away. And it will help him sort of locate himself in that sort of 5 to 7 bracket in Supercross in what is really his first full season. I think you made a tweet saying that this was Prado's third A1, something like that, which is quite astonishing, really. But then it also does show how much of a rookie he is at this game.
I also made another tweet that I was just arguing with someone about before we started this podcast, where I pointed out that incredibly, Jorge landed on a 450 podium in just his 7th 450 start. And in comparison, it took Tomac 9 starts and Chase 7 like Prado. So that puts him in rare air and would indicate that he's on the right track. As with anything Jorge in the world now, the fans are ablaze because I didn't list that Jet podiumed in his first attempt, Anderson his first, Roxon his second, etc., etc. But that obviously wasn't the context of the tweet. I was listing the riders who are around the range of Prado for the context. If I said Prado made it in his 7th, but Jet did it in his first, that's just a shit on Prado tweet.
I mean, I don't mean to kind of deflect from Vital MX and the work you do, but, Steve Mathis and the guys, their race reviews are, as ever, like very engaging listening for, post AMA Supercross and even motocross roundups. And I thought their assessment of like Chase Sexton was pretty much spot on. But when I was listening to sort of Jason, Steve and Jason talking about Chase's feeling on the Kawasaki, I thought, the man has so much talent and ability on a motorcycle that I think putting down a heater or a fast lap is not really going to be the problem. And I think even Prado might have been at that sort of point, but being able to reel off a whole set of laps for a full main event, especially that early in the season when everybody's kind of healthy and building up their fitness, is going to be another task altogether. And I am worried that if Sexton doesn't get this thing, sorted out, then, it might be another bridge that's starting to look a little wonky for him.
If you want to put Prado in this picture and create sort of an MXGP parallel, it is kind of how it worked, where Prado was the mainstay, all reliable, whatever you want to call it, and Herlings and Tim were kind of ahead of him, behind him, and a little more unstable. You could argue that's exactly what we saw with all of the Supercross contenders around him this past weekend. We'll see if it's a trend moving forward, but it's curious. And I think another parallel that suddenly makes so much sense is, remember 22 MXGP, the new gen gas that he hated. He was teary-eyed at points, just absolutely out of love with that Austrian machine. It was a terrible year, weakest MXGP field in some time, and he won just one GP. Terrible year for him. But he rebounded in 23, won the title, came out swinging one-handedly, and that's exactly what's playing out here. So I think that Prado doesn't react well to what he doesn't like, but reacts very well in the face of adversity when he has what he needs.
I think there are parallels, you could even argue, in terms of being perceived as a genius or a pariah to like Christophe Pourcel, because if Christophe Pourcel had the bike and the feeling that he had, he was unstoppable. And Prado, I think, will have that at different Supercross rounds. And this is a bit like scoring a goal in the first 2 minutes of a cup final. I think it's a very sort of strong result from the outset. It does show that Prado's gamble, if you like. I mean, there wasn't really many options open to him apart from sort of trying to wade through a second and third turn with Kawasaki, at jumping out and getting back on a KTM paid off. It does sort of paint him as a little bit of an inflexible rider. Maybe he can only excel on that steel frame, that WP suspension. that kind of mental comfort that he has with Red Bull KTM guys. But yeah, I think it was really encouraging, Lewis. And I mean, obviously to see Max Anstey as well thrive in the 250s, that was really cool, especially after like a very solid sort of WSX campaign for Max. Of course, still haunted by that crash at Birmingham Supercross and sort of seeing it live. My hopes for Max is that he can extend all the way through this West Coast series and actually bring the title. One of the themes about A1 was the age factor, wasn't it? I mean, it kind of haunted Christian Craig to a degree, and now it's sort of floating around Anstey as well. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because MXGP and MX2 has been bashed for years for fashioning the 250s into like a development class, and just like funneling the best talent into the 450s as quickly as possible or as soon as you reach your 23rd birthday. I don't know. I just think Max obviously rides a 250 better for Supercross, and it's good that he's able to still show it.
Yeah, hilarious is the fact that if you search around, I'm sure the same riders complaining about Anstey's age are probably complaining about the MX2 age rule as well. So one of those has to be correct. Yeah. They can't both be wrong. The big winner of Anaheim 1 was Dan Luongo, because 4 heat winners, 3 of which were MXGP graduates, 2 MXGP graduates on the podium in 450s, and the other won the 250 main event. So big congrats to Dan.
I'm not too sure we can credit Dan too much, but I think the development stage of GPs, but this is nothing new. The diversity of the tracks and the conditions and the levels of preparation from half decent to absolutely terrible just gives riders a schooling at off-road riding very early on. And the same way that the best supercrossers in the world get to sort of conquer excellent tracks from their early teens. I think riders who sort of persevere through European Championship and MX2 in their sort of tender years also get that benefit.
Yeah, without doubt. So, in a word, who is your 450 title pick?
Oh, I mean, I still love watching Roxon ride, but I think all the comments about him and his ability to last the season are extremely on point. I still think Cooper Webb. I mean, I think he's just the proven entity, and I think he's going to be the man at the end of the season right up there. Eli Tomac, this was a great opening chapter with Red Bull KTM, Lewis, and I think it's pretty cool that someone can jump from a career on Japanese machinery and get straight on an Austrian bike. I think it shows the sort of the level of the Austrian bikes as well, and the technology involved there. The last few riders that have been on Red Bull KTM, I mean, it hasn't ended in the best way. So I wonder how sort of Eli's personality and the likes of sort of Ian Harrison, Roger DaCosta and those guys over there, how that will develop over time. I think it might sort of head the same way as Ryan Dungey, where it's going to be quite a lasting relationship there, just because I think Eli's personality is maybe more aligned to sort of Dungey. I don't know. I'm just maybe talking out my ass here, but yeah, I still think overall, if you look at the odds, then I would pick Cooper.
It is funny, you talk about riders leaving KTM with distaste, but for whatever reason, KTM seem to be very good at getting riders up to speed quickly. Dungey won his second start on a KTM. Cooper Webb won his third start, his first career win, which was unbelievable. Chase Sexton podiumed his first KTM main event, and now Tomac's won. I don't know what that trend is or what you attribute it to, but it's quite weird considering all the heat they take. They seem to be very adaptable. And maybe that's on the team side or the rider side.
Yeah, it seems like it's a really good point. I think they get the riders up to speed quickly, but then it's about maintaining that level. And I don't know, does maybe some routine set in or some exploration of how they can get even better? Does that end up being a bit of a bugbear? That's kind of the next phase of the relationship. And I wonder how it'll work with ET.
And congrats to our friends at WP, because they had an all-new fork and shock for the Supercross guys to try and quell some of the doubts, and it seems to have done exactly that. Everyone very happy. I've said it this will be the final time I say it, no KYB internals anywhere at KTM. Everyone is on full WP systems, and it seems that they've made a massive step in that regard as well. So that's also good news for the Austrian group. And I guess the CEO was there for the first time too, so it's all coming up orange. Robert Jonas was there as well, and I'm really annoyed because I would love to interview him about Jeffrey and all of this, but it's Anaheim 1. I doubt, but I hope he's going to be in San Diego, because I always like interviewing Robert or Pitt there. It was in the same way we gave Honda props for being accessible. I feel like if you can get in the same room as Robert or Pitt, you do get some really good information. Just you have to get to that point.
Well, KTM are formerly owned by Bajaj Mobility now, aren't they?
Is that how you say it? Bajaj?
Yes.
Okay.
Bajaj.
Okay, I hadn't heard it like that. So not Baha.
And no, Bajaj. But and of course, the biggest outlay is MotoGP, and is coming around to a fresh contract cycle for the teams and the manufacturers with Dorna. They have to sign a new 5-year deal in the coming months. Will KTM, they're already building the next kind of era of motorcycles because the technical rules change for 2027. So there's a commitment there to keep racing on the road. But then, I still think there's quite a few questions around the exact scope of Red Bull KTM's presence in international racing. But, 2026 has started fantastically if you look at Supercross and also Dakar. I think Daniel Sanders is currently leading the Dakar rally. So it's... things are looking pretty good for the orange bikes.
Do you have to go, or have you got 5 minutes? I forgot.
I've got 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes and then we're done. So the Suzuki thing, I was talking to a few people about this because it's gone a little bit quiet, I think as you would expect, but a few people were theorising that if they're going racing in 27, they need to be like buying a workshop, having a test rider, all of this now. So then we were going back and forth on like contract possibilities. I think Kimiya's contract with Yamaha is up. I think Nastan's contract with Husky is up. There's quite a few team options in the paddock. And then one struck me. Standing construct. Would that not make perfect sense? Belgian team. So if Sylvain Gabors is going to be involved, there's some synergy there. Wim Van Hoff worked with the Suzuki MX2 team when Hunter was there and Sewer, and so I don't know when that would have been, 2017, I guess. So there's some history there. I feel like if there was ever a time for standing construct, maybe they don't want to come back, but if there was ever a time, that seems like the match made in heaven.
Yeah, did they sell off the Goldfish Bowls? And
yeah, Nastan actually have those Goldfish Bowls now. Because that's why you'll see standing construct on the Nastan rider jerseys, because that signage was included in the deal of the fish bowls, which once again I realise is we are so far into the weeds of MXGP with insight like that.
Yeah, Tim Mathis and his company still keeping a connection with the sport, at least, which is good. But yeah, you're right, Lewis. There's the enthusiasm and the setup there, if not quite the infrastructure anymore. But I was thinking about this earlier with Suzuki, because obviously Roxon riding well, Jason Anderson doing a pretty good job in WSX. And I don't know how I feel about Suzuki, because I think their products are archaic. I think their image has taken a battering because they're proven to be a fickle company. There's almost like a lack of honor to their racing intents, because they dip in, they dip out. They were in motocross for a good few years, and there's a whole kind of iconography, if I say that correctly, associated with the brand and Grand Prix racing. But if they're just going to come back with an outdated bike and maybe sign a speculative deal to try 3 or 4 years, then why bother? So yeah, I'm not holding my breath over it, and I'm also not thinking, I can't wait until Suzuki come back, to be honest.
With your history in MXGP and MotoGP then, and your experience around Suzuki, if Suzuki come back, would your attitude be, let's see how long this lasts?
Yes.
Okay.
But the first thing is it's great that it's another factory team. My first question would be, how much are the Japanese involved? How much will the European side have to develop the bikes? What kind of resources are going into this? What is the motivation for this? You have the likes of Triumph and Ducati stating very openly that their initial attempts to develop off-road bikes are to find a new demographic of rider. A kid that's going to be riding a 250 Triumph dirt bike might also be buying a Bonneville or, like a Tiger motorcycle further down the line if they're really sort of clued up with the brand. What is the main motivation? If someone like Sylvain Gabors and the integrity that he has is involved, and that gives me encouragement. But if Suzuki are just going to sort of breeze back into the paddock, then it's good that there's going to be more opportunities for riders. But I think there will be question marks over it.
Yeah, deservedly so as well. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to get off your chest?
No, that's it. I appreciate the fact that you're really busy with Supercross, and there's going to be sort of slim pickings when it comes to MXGP sort of material over the coming weeks. So it'd be good to see some other riders engaging in some decent social media activity. Let's see what you're up to, guys. What you're wearing, how you're looking on the bike. Maybe we can do another catch up on one of these podcasts. I actually wanted to reach out and message Jorge Prado because I tried to ask him if he'll come on this podcast before, but because of the situation with Kawasaki and what he can and cannot say, it was difficult for him. But maybe now there's a whole sort of new topic to talk about because he must be flushed with confidence, and it would be good. He's one of the very few riders that we've had on this show, so it would be good to have him on again.
Yeah, we've had, who have we had? Pauls? Did we have
we had Jeremy and Pauls and Jeremy and Jorge.
Yeah.
And then you've consistently failed to deliver Jeffrey Herlings.
I can't even deliver Ben Watson. Like, he's messaged me twice during this podcast, but I can't deliver him. Nobody knows why, but let me tell you, it's all going very well, so that's exciting.
Can't we say to Chase Sexton, come on our podcast and talk about MXGP?
You know what? That probably would be possible. You know what? We can do...
to him, we're not going to ask you anything about Supercross or your Kawasaki setup, but we are going to ask you about tracks that you think look very shit or very good. Riders that you like the look of. When did you first start watching MXGP? I think he might be half interested in doing that.
Yeah, I think he, as I've said many a time, he is all in on MXGP. That's part of the reason we're friends, is because he picks my brain about how all of this is going. But on the easier end of the scale, I would like to deliver Glenn and Calvin coming up, because Glenn for his Brazil deal and Calvin just to find out what a different rider thinks of the Ducati and their progress. And the final point, Ducati and MXGP using factory connection suspension in 2026, which is Factory Connection's first foray into MXGP. So I think that's quite interesting. Of course, Wilvo Louis Vosters will have their own in-house suspension guy doing the tweaks and whatnot, but the systems, the internals will be factory connection. So that's very interesting. And hopefully you found this podcast interesting, very enjoyable, best podcast of the week. Adam mentioned the Racer X race reviews at a pinnacle of moto podcasting, but I'd really like to think that this very show slides in at number 2 on the hierarchy. But maybe let us know what you think, and we will see you real soon for another episode of the MXGP podcast show.